Okay, as we work through the B-flat blues and other tunes and other types of any type of exercise or tune that's got a dominant 7 chord that's resolving in a 5-to-1 root movement, I'm going to make this quick review video for you guys to remember all of your options for altering the dominant chord. So once again, anytime you have a dominant 7th chord that's functioning as a 5 chord, right? So, for example, if you have a G7 chord, as long as the root movement from that G7 chord to the next chord is some type of 5-to-1, right? So G7 resolving to any type of C chord, C major, C minor, C dominant, C half diminished, you can alter that 5 chord, right? So let's look at it in the diatonic 2-5, right? It probably came about, this whole concept of altering chords, because if you do it, in the key of C, it's easy to see, right? Because it's all the white notes. If I do my diatonic, 2, 2, 5, 1, right? 2, 5, 1, right? My thirds and sevens move, right, by half step, right? Whereas if I'm doing the classic major 7 from the flat 3, major 7 flat 5 from the flat 7, you notice I've got 2 common tones, right? The A and the E, which then move down a whole step each, right? So piano players probably got bored with keeping it diatonic, right? And said, well, what if I add some little chromatic passing tones on the 5 chord to get some moving lines, right? So if I do my 2 chord, right, and I go to my 5, I can add this note as a chromatic passing tone, right? So it goes 5 on the 2 chord, flat 9 on the 5 chord that resolves to a 5. So we call this a 5, flat 9, 5 voice leading line, right? And my pinky can do the same thing, right? It's on the 9. Instead of leaving it there, which now it's a 13, and then it becomes a 9, on the 1 chord, right, I can bring both of these fingers down a half step on the 5 chord. And now I've got a flat 13. So this is a 9, flat 13, 9 voice leading line. So I end up with a 2 minor chord, right? A 5-7, flat 9, flat 13, 1 major. But of course, anytime you've got G7 going to any type of C, you can do this. And it's pretty flexible. Jazz is very flexible in this way. The only rule is it has to be a dominant chord, right? So it has to have a natural 3 and a flat 7. Okay? And now you have to incorporate a flat 9 or a sharp 9, because that's our first extension, right? 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So you have to alter that first extension, make it a flat 9 or a sharp 9, because if you start tinkering around with the 13s and the 11s, before you've altered the sharp 9, it confuses the ear. So if I tried, for example, to do natural 9, right, here's my third, my flat 7, my natural 9, and the flat 13, that doesn't work. This does not work, because it sounds too much like whole tone, right? Which is a static or a non-functional dominant, meaning it doesn't like to go 5-to-1. So the only rule is you have to have a third and a flat 7, right? Because if you don't, it's not a dominant chord. And then we have to alter our first extension before we tinker around with the other extensions. So our first extension is the 9. Okay, so once I've got a third and a flat 7, I can pick either flat 9 or sharp 9, right? And then it's pretty wide open what I do with my pinky if I'm building my chord from my flat 7 above the root of the dominant, right? So I can do diminished major 7, which gets me flat 9, natural 13, right? So that's diminished major 7 from the flat 7 for a dominant 13, flat 9, right? I can do half diminished from the flat 7, right? Which gets me a dominant 7, flat 9, flat 13, right? I can even just do fully diminished 7 from the flat 7, right, which just gives me the flat 9 and a natural 5, right? And if I really wanted to, it gets a little bit crunchy, so I wouldn't do this in this inversion. But you could also do a sharp 11. So this would be flat 9, sharp 11, but this breaks our rule about, remember, on the top of voicings, we don't like whole steps or half steps. So if I was going to do this, I would invert it, and I would build it from the flat 9. So now I've got my third, my 7, a sharp 11, and a flat 9. Okay, so I've got diminished major 7, half diminished, and fully diminished, all from the flat 7 would work. Okay? Now I can also do the Lydian grip from the major third, right? Major 7, flat 5 from the major third. That gives me third, right? Flat 7. So I've got a flat 13 and a sharp 9. And so, of course, if I invert this, because I could build this from the flat 7 too. If I invert this, I bring in the F and the B flat down. Right? Now I've got flat 7, sharp 9, third, flat 13. Right? I could also do this same voicing, but with my pinky on the E. Right? So that's essentially this voicing, which sounds pretty weird, but this is a sus major 7, flat 5. Right? Because here's a major 7. Sorry, building it from the major third. So from B, here's a major 7, right? Right, here's a sus major 7, right? Sus means add, or not add, it means play a 4 instead of a 3. So we're going to substitute a 4 instead of a 3. So here's sus major 7. Right, and if I flat the 5, now I've got sus major 7, flat 5. Now if I play sus major 7, flat 5 built from the major third above G, it gets me a dominant 7, right? Natural 3, flat 7, with a natural 13 and a sharp 9. So I can play it in this inversion, or I can play it in this inversion. That's a pretty interesting one, right? So I can do B major, major 7 sus flat 5, right? I can do the B Lydian grip, which is this one. Right. So a lot of options, right? Diminished major 7 from the flat 7, half diminished from the flat 7, fully diminished from the flat 7, right? Lydian grip from the third, right? Or major 7 sus flat 5 from the major third. And then, of course, the inversions of any of these. So that's how you can alter dominant chords. And you can use them, like I said, anytime you have a dominant chord that's going in a 5-to-1 root movement, right? So a dominant chord that immediately jumps to a chord either with the root up a fourth or down a fifth. So in the blues, where can we do this? Well, technically, you might be able to do it in bar 1, right? Because bar 1 goes from, for example, in a B-flat blues, it goes from the 1 dominant, right, to the 4 dominant. So from B-flat 7 to E-flat 7. Okay, so in the key of E-flat, B-flat is the 5. So that's a 5-1 chord progression. But since the B-flat's the very first chord of the form, it can sound a little bit disorienting to jump straight to an altered, right? So if you're going to do it, only do it in the second half of the measure. So you go 1, 2, 3, and 4. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and right. So I'm starting with my diatonic mixolydian, right? No alterations at all, and then halfway through the bar I'm jumping to an altered. In this case I'm doing the inversion of the Lydian grip. Okay, or just don't do it at all in the first measure. So you either don't do it all in the first measure, or you only do it in the first half, or excuse me, you only do it in the second half of the measure, because you want to establish that the B-flat 7 is actually the top of the tune and kind of like the tonic. But in bar 4 of the blues, you can definitely alter that B-flat dominant, because it's part of a minor, or not a minor, it's part of a major 2-5 in the key of E-flat, right? It's part of a 2-5 to the 4. Or even if you ignore the 2, it's just an entire bar of a B-flat dominant that's going to an E-flat, right? So you can alter that, right? Or just, bar 1, bar 2, bar 3, and then turn it into B flat altered in bar 4. Okay. Bar 6, bar 7. Now here, once again, we've got a G7, right? That's going to be heading to a C minor. So that's a 5 to 1, right? So we definitely need to alter that because it's also going to a minor 1. And once again, it could be part of a minor 2-5. Alright? And now we're in the last 4 bars, so the other spot is after the 2 chord, right? C minor 7. Once we go to this F7, right? That F7 is going to a B flat. Right? So that's a 5 to 1, right? So we can alter that F7. In that case, I'm doing leading grid from the major third, right? Because that F7 is functioning as a 5 of B flat. And then, of course, for the turnaround at the end of the tune, once again, we can alter the G and the F because they're both going 5 to 1. Okay? So that's a quick review of how altered dominants work for jazz piano, when you can do them generically, and when you can do them over a B flat blues.